What is going on, my noobets? And I have one question for you. Have you ever wondered if a warlock can dominate the battlefield at close range? If this is a question you've also had, look no further. This guide will show you how to transform your warlock into a formidable melee DPS force, capable of standing toe-to-toe with Neverwinter's strongest rogues. Are you ready to give the rogue a run for their money and challenge Neverwinter's top melee tunes? From hand-picked powers to crucial feats and gear, you'll gain all the tools needed to unleash devastating melee damage. Let's dive in. For this melee-focused warlock build, we rely on powers that deliver formidable damage up close while generating soul sparks quickly. So for our first at will, we're going to go with the Hand of Blight, which does 75 magnitude at range and generates 1 soul spark. In melee range, it generates 2 soul sparks and does 55 magnitude, as well as it reduces the target's damage by 4%. So this is going to be our bread and butter. This is going to be the whole makeup of the whole build on why and how we're playing at melee range. So you're going to be taking Hand of Blight in your main at will ability, and that's what you're going to be striking in melee range with. Our second at will is going to be Hellish Rebuke. This does 75 magnitude on its initial hit and generates 1 soul spark. It then also applies a dot damage over time of 15 magnitude, and each dot tick generates 2 soul sparks per hit. So this secondary at will offers consistent damage as well as an additional soul spark generation through its dot effect. When we get to the rotation, I will show how these two work very well as far as generating massive soul sparks for us. Moving on to our encounters. So our first encounter, not in any particular order, we will go over the right order when we get to the rotation part, will be Vampiric Embrace. Vampiric Embrace does 500 magnitude, converts damage into healing, right? So this is very good for the new pair of pants, which again, when we get to the gear, I will show that, but it's very good burst damage for us DPS Warlocks now. As well as if you use Vampiric Embrace on a cursed enemy, it then's going to use your Curse Consume, which is going to double the amount of hit points observed. So this is very good for sustain. This is a very good additional layer of defense, if you want to call it. It keeps you up. It keeps you from having to use your health stones. Our second encounter is going to be Killing Flame. Now this is a bread and butter. This has been an encounter that's been used for warlocks for all times, right? Killing Flame does 650 to 975 magnitude damage depending on the missing hit points of the target. Killing your target with this spawns a soul puppet. We don't really care about the added effect because we have ways to go around that, but what's most importantly here is how huge and how bursty this attack is, as well as it's got a decent cooldown, 9.4 seconds. You can't beat that. There's ways to make that better or worse depending on where your cooldown recovery is at. And then for our last encounter, which is recently reworked with the Warlock, is going to be the Hellfire Ring. So the Hellfire Ring does a 200 magnitude damage, its initial hit, and then it has the added effect of hazard damage, which is, you might as well call it dot damage. It does 50 magnitude 5 times, and it's for over 5 seconds. So it's not massive damage, but it just works with the build. For our dailies, we're going with Tyrannical Curse, which does 1150 magnitude against the target, and it increases the damage we deal to that target by 15% for 20 seconds. It also has the added effect of damage linking surrounding enemies, passing on 50% of the damage that we do to the main target to secondary targets within a range of the main target. So this is great for just bursting down bosses, as well as like in Dungeons of Dread Sanctum where there's a boss and adds, also doing damage to those adds as well while you're doing big damage on the boss. Our secondary at will is going to be Soul Siphon. So Soul Siphon has 600 magnitude times 2, so that's a total of 1200 magnitude in a 40-foot radius, hitting all nearby enemies and automatically applying curse. So this has a curse cap of 15, so it can curse up to 15 enemies, and so this is great for dealing heavy area damage and setting up further curse targets for your encounters. For our class feats, the first one we're going to be choosing is going to be Shadow Walk, which we're mainly using it just for the 2.5% crit strike. If you can find another 2.5% crit strike or another 2,500 crit strike, if your ratings will allow you to do so, you do not have to use Shadow Walk, and you can choose any other options that you want to use. Our second class feat is going to be All-Consuming Curse. This synergy is crucial as cursing enemies boosts our damage, which you'll see when we get to our feats, as well as when we get to our rotation, why this is so crucial in the build itself. For our feats, the very first one that we're going to choose is going to be Double Scorch, where your Soul Scorch initial hit deals 25 additional magnitude per Soul Spark spent, allowing Soul Scorch to reach 300 magnitude at 6 Soul Spark spent, or 900 magnitude at 18 Soul Sparks, which is significant damage boost with the rework that we just recently got to the Warlock. Our second feat is going to be Warlock's Curse, which is going to increase to our damage by 50% against cursed targets. So again, All-Consuming Curse allows you to curse up targets. Then Warlock's Curse takes effect, we do 15% more damage to them. Our third feat is going to be Soul Desecration. Your soul puppet no longer dissipates after 20 seconds and deals 100% more damage. While this is not a massive damage boost, it is noticeable improvement for sustained DPS. So this is basically almost like having a second companion by your side that's always up, and when your soul puppet dies, it is automatically resummoned, so it's always up. So it's not like a companion. When it dies, it's down for a while. Nope, it dies, it comes back up, and like I said, it's doing an additional 100% more damage. Now we're going to choose this over a risky investment because Hellfire Ring's rework makes it harder to stack the risky investments quickly. Before you could pop down the Hellfire Ring, you get your risky investment stacks completely up instantly. Now that is no longer a thing, so it's actually, once you see the rest of the build, it's a little bit better to have your soul puppet up to do the sustained damage, which is less than to try to fight and keep up the stacks of risky investment. For our fourth feat, we're choosing Creeping Death. So Creeping Death deals 25 magnitude damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds, and that stacks 5 times. Now this is my personal favorite. This is what I like to use. I'll be using it for a very long time. However, Executioner's Gift is not a bad one either. You do 30% more damage as the target's health diminish. So the way I like to explain it to a lot of people is Executioner's Gift does more damage on the back end, while Creeping Death does more damage on the front end. However, they both are very comparable. Test them out, right? Play with both of them and see which one you prefer. I personally prefer Creeping Death, so that's what I have in the build. And then for our last feat, we're going to be using Wrathful Souls. Your damage is increased by 1% per soul spark up to a max of 30 soul sparks for a total of 30% damage. So again, this feat is amazing for melee style Warlock, which we will be able to consistently generate and have max soul sparks. Now for enchantments, in our offensive slot we have 1 Sapphire giving us 1485 combat advantage and crit strike, 1 Moonstone giving us another 1485 power and combat advantage, Opal giving us that same power and crit strike, and a Period giving us accuracy and crit strike. In a utility slot we have a Garnet just go ahead and giving us that 2700 forte, and as always in all of my builds except for my tanking build, we're running with the 4 Garnets for the 2700 defense. For your overloads, first one wants to be your zone specific. So the last dungeon I was running was an MIC, so I just did the Astral Elves to get a little bit 8% more damage on them. But the one that's probably never going to change in any of my DPS builds, at least not at the moment, is going to be the Devil's Precision, giving us that 5% crit strike and crit sev. In the combat enhancement, we're going with the Lightning Flash, and Celestial is giving us 10.8% accuracy and crit strike, so that is a much needed to hit in those stats caps. And then for our bonus, we're running with the Recharge Speed, again with not having the Soul Sparks giving us reduced cooldown. This little bit right here is just going to help us get there. All right, so taking a look at our ability points, we're going all in on Dex and Int. So Dex is giving us crit sev and movement speed, so we definitely want that crit sev definitely to hit that hard cap of the new 120, so we got to get that. And then Int is going to be our magic damage boost, so every power that the Warlock uses is going to be magical. If you see necrotic damage, that is going to fall under the realm of necrotic, so that's, you definitely want to go all in there. For our consumables, we're going to be using some of the same things that we've used in many of our DPS builds. We're going to Flask of Potency to grab that 5% crit sev, Watermelon Sorbet to get that 5% power as well as accuracy. Got to hit those power and accuracy cat stats. We're going to go Ratatouille, which you can get from the Stronghold in case you don't know where to get that from. Gives you 20,000 maximum hit points and 4,000 accuracy. And then last but not least, we're going to go with the Sun Lord's Gift Elixir, which is giving us 2,000 more accuracy and another 5% combat advantage. Now on to everything that brings this build together is our gear. So the first piece of gear, our head, we're going to be running the Enchanted Depth Weave Cap, which is giving us 2,400 crit strike and forte, as well as we have combat advantage as an equip bonus, which every 5 seconds you are in combat, you gain 1% combat advantage, which stacks 10 times. So that's going to give us 10% combat advantage. For our chest, we're going to Abyss Conqueror's Mauler's Plate, giving us 1538 combat advantage and crit strike, as well as we get the equip bonus of Reckless Rage. Whenever you deal damage to an enemy, gain a stack of Reckless Rage, increase your crit save by 3%, but decreasing your deflect by 1% for 5 seconds, max stack 6. So this is going to give us 18% crit save, which is going to be huge for hitting that new hard cap of 120 for crit save. Now for our arms, this is not so useful for the build at the moment, but it's there to help back up getting that crit save. We're going with the Crystal Weave Armlets, which is giving us 1633 accuracy and 2010 combat advantage, as well as 1131 forte with the equip bonus of Enveloped Rage. When in combat with 3 or more enemies, your crit save is increased by 1.8% every 2 seconds. So once this is fully stacked out, we get 9% crit save. This is similar to what the pants gives us. So the pants and the arms kind of go hand in hand, giving us another 18%, which you'll see once we get to the pants. But it's just there to kind of help. For the weapon set, we are using the Perfect Weapon set, which your base damage and overall outgoing healing is increased by 3%. We don't care so much about the outgoing healing, but we do care about that base damage boost, as well as your incoming damage is reduced by 7.5% when your stamina is empty, which shouldn't happen too often as a DPS, but if it does, at least you know you get a little bit of a defensive layer there, reducing the incoming damage by 7.5%. The bread and butter of this weapon set is at the start of combat, your crit strike and crit save is increased by 1%. For every 5 seconds you're in combat, these are increased by 1% for a max of 5 stacks. So once you get the full 60 seconds in combat, you now have an additional 5% in crit strike and crit save, which again, like I've mentioned plenty of times already, is very important for hitting that 120 hard cap of crit save. For our boots, we're running the Master Dorgor's Mercenary Boots, which this gives us 10,000 crit save when our health is above 50%, and when it's not above 50%, then we get a 20% movement speed increase. There are another pair of boots. I currently don't have them on this character, but there's another pair of boots that give you 7.5% crit save, I believe it is, when you're in a party. So you have either or boots there. For our artifact set, we are running the Mastercraft set, which this set is going to give us 2.5% accuracy and 5% recharge for 5 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. So that's going to be 7.5% accuracy and 15% recharge speed, which again, like I mentioned earlier when we went over the powers, when we're not using soul sparks now to do cooldown recovery, this 15% cooldown would be massive for us when we have that at full stacks. For our first ring, we're running the Dreadbreaker's Loop, which you gain 0.8% power for each player in your team. When your teammates are 25 or closer to you, their forte is increased by 1%. As well as this ring is giving us 3150 crit strike and 7,000 forte and 1.5 action point gain. Now there's a couple of different rings. There are 2 different types of rings that the new area, the Dress Sanctum, gives you. There's the ones that give you 5% in Dress Sanctum and Power Skyhold, and then anywhere else is 2.5, and then there's this type. I prefer this type, the 0.8% power for players in your team. And the reason why I choose this is because this works for inside of Power Skyhold and in Dress Sanctum and anywhere else. So 4% is what you're going to get. If you go with the other ring, you get 5% when in Dress Sanctum or Power Skyhold, which is fine. It's only 1% more than what this ring's giving us. However, the minute we go outside of those 2 zones, then we drop down to only getting 2.5% power. So this is better for overall sustaining that high amount of power. Again, like I mentioned in many of my other builds, a lot of my builds are meant for you to be able to have self-sustaining of your own stats, requiring very little from your teammates, right? So having those other rings that give you 5% may be better for you to require other things from teammates or whatnot. But if you drop down to a different zone, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what your teammates have. So maximizing the benefit you give to yourself ultimately means you'll be able to do maximum damage if somebody doesn't have something that they don't have. For our second ring, we're running the Moon Dancer's Binding of Precision, which is giving us 5,400 combat advantage and 1,800 crit strike. And when your stamina is over 75%, your accuracy is increased by 7.5%. So this is just another good chunk of accuracy right here. For our shirt, which is in many of my other DPS builds as well, here's a Crota Shirt of the Dragon, giving us 975 accuracy, 975 crit strike, as well as we get that 1.5% recharge speed. Again, helping out with that cooldown. The bread and butter of this shirt, though, is the Oculate Advantage, which is just giving us a plus 5% combat advantage and negative 25% control resist. The control resist is garbage. We don't care about it. Nobody knows what it does. And for our last gear piece is Cerebral's Predator's Ink, giving us 2535 accuracy, 682 defense, and 878 forte, with also 1.5% action point gain. Whenever you are healed in combat, you have a 10% chance to gain 9% crit sev for 10 seconds. When we go over our rotation, if you haven't already picked up on it, this is something that can be procced regardless because you always have a healer in your group, but we have a way to self-proc or manually proc or force proc this to be up. So we have a chance from our healers proccing it, and then we have a chance from our encounters proccing it, and then we have a chance from our boons to proc. So we almost have 100% uptime on these pants because of how we're set up. And we'll get over that when we get to the rotation powers. For our main artifact, we're running the Marco's Mystic Marker, which is just going to give us the 10% damage from all sources to the target. And then I'm also running the Crystal Soul Flight, if need be, the Artillery's Beacon, and then the Blood Brass Pistol, which I use when I'm in Dread Sanctum or Power Skyhold. Outside of those two areas, it is not really that good. When you're in a trial, it may be fine because you need 10 different artifacts, but when you're in Pirate Skyhold or Dread Sanctum, it's 10% damage bonus. Anywhere else, it's 6%. So you want to go with either one of these other options, whether it's the Beacon, the Marker, or the Crystal Soul Flight, rather than the pistol being your main artifact if you're outside of Dread Sanctum. Here's a look at our campaign boons. So you guys can pause the video here to kind of see what I'm working with here. Pretty much all the normal stuff. Got full out power, almost got the full hit points, movement speed, recharge, forte. Like I said, definitely go ahead and pause the video. You guys can take a peek at those there. For our stronghold boons, we're going with power in the offense. In defense, we're going with the defense. And then in utility, we are going with revive sickness. Onto our companions. So for our summon companions, I like to use the Flapjack. I would recommend you choose something that's going to help your stats. So that's things like Flapjack, Portobello, the Tutor, Etrium, Minsk, any of those things that helps your stats. Now, if your team already has all that covered, then definitely choose a striker that will help you do damage. But me personally, I tend to always run with Flapjack and I back up to the Tutor. For our companion gear, we're running 3 Molten Talismans of the Companion, giving us 1650 combat advantage and crit sev. As you can see, I'm trying to find crit sev and combat advantage and power anywhere I can get it. For our companion enhancement, we're running the Acute Senses, which gives us 9% combat advantage for 15 seconds. So this is at a chance. Now, this is 9%. If you already have an additional 3% combat advantage, you don't need the full 9. What I would recommend using would be the Enduring Senses. And what the Enduring Senses is, while your companion is summoned and not down, it increases your combat advantage by 6%. Now, yes, like I said, it's 3% less. However, you remove the chance effect, and as long as your companion's alive, you'll get the 6%. So for my instance, if I were to use this, I'm running a Flapjack, which is a ranged companion, so his chance of being down is very unlikely. So therefore, I have the 6% up most of the time. Granted, the Acute Senses chance rate is pretty decently high, so you can proc it fairly often, but there's a chance where it won't proc, and then therefore your combat advantage will be lacking 9% for however long it takes you to reproc it. So those are your two options right there. For our slotted companions, we're running the usual offenders there. We're going with the Raptor to go ahead and get that 22.5. If you don't include yourself, that's 18.5 power. In our defensive slot, we have the Golden Cat giving us 9% combat advantage. In our first universal slot, we're running the Mercenaries Discipline giving us 4.5% power and 4.5% combat advantage. In my second universal slot, this is where I use my damaging companion. So for bossing, I go with the Batiri's Wisdom giving us 14% damage versus bosses. You have other things like the Neverwinter's Night or the Dragon Insight, which is doing the same thing as a Batiri but against dragons. So you can pick your poison there. And in our utility slot, we're running the Book Imp's Presence for that 4.5% accuracy and 4.5% combat advantage. And again, like I said, mentioned already, there's things that you can change here, right? If you're running with an organized group that you always run with, you can change this up where you don't need to run so many companions that are giving you stats. You can run more damaging companions. You know, you can run the Batiri Wisdom with the Neverwinter's Night and the Mints, the bigger they are, to give yourself more damage. However, this build is more sustained for you to be running with groups that aren't always organized. Somebody may be missing some power. There might be somebody that doesn't have a flapjack or a tutor to give you combat advantage. So this is going to maximize you. For our mounts, we're running the Giant Toad as our combat power, just giving us that massive 3000 magnitude, as well as it is a intelligence based mount, so this is going to be scaled also off of our intelligence, so that's good to have there. And then for our equip power, we're going to be running the opportunistic, which is just give us another 4500 combat advantage. In our stable, we're running 1 Mender's Covenant, 2 Executioner's Covenants, 1 Enchanter's Hex, and 1 Warlord's Motivation. Now, the only things that are really required for the build, the Mender's Covenant and the 2 Executioner's Covenants are the only 2 that are really required for the build, so therefore your stats meet where they need to meet. Okay, so before we get into the actual rotation, this is what I'm looking out of combat and completely buffed, and this is what I'm looking like in combat buffed. So these are the kind of numbers that you can be expecting. Okay, so for our rotation, we're going to talk through it real quick. You're going to start with Hellish Rebuke from range. So as you're going up to your target, this was the boss. So as I'm running up to the boss, I will throw out 1 Hellish Rebuke to start the Soul Spark generation process. Once I've closed that gap, I'm going to use 1 to 2 Hands of Blight. Once I'm in there, I'm going to use Hellfire Ring to start the DPS going, ramping up. Then I'm going to use Vampiric Embrace. Now it's very important after you use the Vampiric Embrace to use Hellish Rebuke, because Vampiric Embrace will remove your curse, so you need to use Hellish Rebuke to reapply your curse. After that has been reapplied, then you will follow up with a Killing Flame and then the Soul Scorch. At the end of the rotation, also follow up with a Hellish Rebuke so that your Soul Sparks are being generated while you're waiting on your cooldown. So now I'll show you what that looks like. So if I'm coming up on the boss, I'll use the Hellish Rebuke. I'll get in there, 1 to 2 Hellish Blight, Hellfire Ring, Vampiric Embrace, Hellish Rebuke again, Killing Flame, Soul Scorch. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Wait for everything to come off cooldown. Hellfire Ring, Vampiric Embrace, Hellish Rebuke, Killing Flame, Soul Scorch. Just like that. Now when it comes to your rotation during an Artie call, it's going to be somewhat similar. It's going to be different just a little bit. You're still going to use the Hellish Rebuke at the beginning of the Artie call. Then you're going to go into your daily to get that 15% damage increase. Then you're going to go Artifact. Then you're going to go through a full rotation. Hellfire Ring, Vampiric Embrace, reapply your curse with Hellish Rebuke, Killing Flame, Mount, Belt Item, and then Soul Scorch. I promise you, you have plenty of time to get all that out of the way. So if we're going to do this, Hellish Rebuke, daily, Artifact, Hellfire Ring, Vampiric Embrace, reapply the curse, Killing Flame, Mount, Belt Item, Soul Scorch. That is your rotation. So between all the gears, the mount, the companions, and the powers, and the rotation, that will set you up to have your Warlock do melee DPS. So I hope this guide helps you tear through enemies while staying up and close and personal. And if you wanted to be something other than a ranged character, you wanted to try something new and be a melee character, well, this is the guide for you. So if you found this video helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more content, as well as check out some of the other Neverwinter build guide videos in the playlist. It's in the link down in the description below. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.